الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Inshallah ta'ala, today's reminder will come from the 6 juz as we take one from each juz. Inshallah, we are currently inside Surah An-Nisa, and after that inshallah we will be reading Surah Al-Ma'idah. And my reminder comes from the very first verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil-uqud. O you who believe, fulfill your promises or your trusts or your covenants. This verse subhanAllah is very short, but it's very, very powerful. In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attaches 2 things here. Number 1, a person who has iman will always fulfill his promise, is a person of his word. Never breaks his promises, never breaks his word, always does what he or she says. The context of the ayah as well is very, very important. That if you be listening to the last few verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that if you have a contract or a promise, always fulfill your contract or your promise. And there was a nation that was described in these ayat that we just read, that had a contract and had a promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they broke it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in these verses, Surah An-Nisa, the exact point in which they broke the contract. Which group of people was Allah talking about here? Bani Israel. Bani Israel had a contract with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an agreement with them. And on that agreement, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He raised the mountain of Tur above them. They made a contract, they would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they broke it. And in that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes they broke it in many ways. Number 1, in which they broke it when it came to the killing of the Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that they didn't just, not just the fact that they distracted the prophets, but they even went to kill the prophets. As we know, Zakaria Islam, Yahya Islam was killed at their hands. Likewise, they broke the contract when it came to the killing or the boasting of Isa alayhi salam. As we come to find the verses there, Inna qatalna Isa ibn Maryam, they boasted that we killed him. They broke the contract when it came to the respect of Maryam alayhi salam. They said she was a bad woman, she did this and that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in great detail how they broke the contract and how they were a group of people who were the best of people, but because they didn't live up to their promises, they became the worst of people. Now when it comes to the word aqd, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, uqud is the plural, the singular is aqd. Aqd means anything which is tight or strong, like a knot is called an aqd. That's why we call even aqidah, your belief. It comes to the same word, something which is tight, something that is unbreakable. The aqd is 2 forms. You have a contract with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have a contract with man. And both ways Allah says don't break it. The first type, when it comes to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't be like Bani Israel. And don't be likewise like the Christians, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had an agreement with them, and they broke their agreement on several occasions, and hence they became not the best of people, but they became the worst of people. So number 1 is our aqd with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then our agreement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we worship Him alone and associate none partners with Him. And if you fulfill that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in return He will give you what? He will give you Jannah. That is your contract. The second half of the contract is when it comes to uqud, is when it comes to dealing with people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us that as people we should always fulfill our promises, fulfill our contracts. Be that in trade, you're fair in your business. Be that when it comes to marriage, you're fair with your spouse. Be that in just talking with people, you make a vow, I'm going to see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you turn up on time. Whatever it is, you fulfill your promises. Because the one who doesn't fulfill his promises, that the Prophet ﷺ spoke about that person, who was described as a person who makes a promise and then breaks it. It was the hadith as well. The munafiqeen. That the Prophet ﷺ said that the munafiq has certain attributes. One of those is that when he makes a promise, he breaks it. When he speaks, he lies. When he's entrusted with something, he betrays his trust. So this is why it's very important with these ayat that we understand the meanings, and that we understand individually with people, we fulfill our contracts. And when it comes to our contract, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't behave like Bani Israel. Because if you do behave like them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could do to you what He done to them. One of the things that the Bani Israel they did, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them that on the Saturday, don't go out fishing. You all know the story. And when they went out fishing, there's three groups amongst them. One of them said, don't do it. They told them not to commit the evil. Another group actually went out and committed the evil. And a third group, they didn't stop them and didn't do anything, just let them go. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the verse that the Imam was going to recite, that from amongst them, because of the betrayal of the contract, Allah turned them into qirada wal khanazir, turned them into apes and turned them into pigs. And that's not just mentioned in the Quran, but it's also mentioned in the Old Testament as well. So because they broke the contract. So we as Muslims, inshallah ta'ala, our vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we fulfill the covenant with Allah of Tawheed, and we also fulfill the covenant amongst ourselves that we're honest and we're truthful and we don't have the traits of the munafiqeen.
Inshallah.
Barakallahu feekum. Inshallah, we will stop there.